Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Financial Advisors Want to Know podcast. I'm Catherine Tindall with Dominion. We're a CPA firm that specializes in working for the advisor industry. On today's episode, I have with me Brian Thorp. He's the founder and CEO of Wealthtender, which was recognized by wealthmanagement.com as one of its top 10 innovators and influencers to change the wealth management industry in 2024. Wealthtender is the first financial review platform designed to help hundreds of financial advisors with impactful benefits to rank higher in search engines, build authority online, and accelerate the growth of their business. So I want to welcome Brian on. Thanks for coming on today, Brian.
My pleasure. Thanks so much for having me, Catherine.
So it's a common thing that I don't really go into the SEC space, but a lot of the clients that I have, it's something that I'm peripherally aware of because it does a lot of times impact some of the things on the financial side. But something I've been noticing more of, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, is there's been more actions recently from them, specifically with marketing. And so I thought it would be a great place for us to start is just talking about some of the things that you've been seeing and things that have been problems that you've been encountering for your advisor clients when it comes to SEC issues specifically related to marketing violations and people's websites having information that the SEC is taking not happy with. So is that I've been seeing that on the sidelines. Is that what you've been seeing, in this space? Is that there's been more actions, more activity when it comes to actually going after some of these violations on the marketing front?
For sure, that's exactly correct. So, as you alluded, the SEC put forth its marketing rule that became effective in 2021 with an 18-month transition period. And so we're well past that now, where any advisor should be familiar with the marketing rule. And subsequent to that transition period, we've now seen the SEC come out with various risk alerts, identifying areas where they've really seen problematic areas where advisors are not in compliance with the rule. And that was really the shot across the bow that subsequent to those risk alerts, we would start to see enforcement actions. And so over the course of 2024, that's exactly what we've now started to see. And I think
Mhm.
they really started more on what we would consider to be the more problematic or areas of the rule that could have greatest harm to individual investors. And within the
Mhm.
marketing rule, the promotion of hypothetical investment performance was one area that they really started and called out, and really focusing more, I think, on the more flagrant violations that they spotted. Subsequently, later in the summer and just more recently, we've seen the enforcement actions come into areas more where Wealthtender and my company are really focused, helping advisors compliantly collect and promote testimonials, and specifically the most recent enforcement action from the SEC just about early this fall was really calling out advisors with regard to third party ratings published on their website and
Mhm.
specifically testimonials in both instances where they felt the firms that they flagged and ultimately penalized well over $1 million, with the even relatively small firms being charged the lowest fine they assessed was about $60,000. So I think that was a surprise to the industry, and it was really around the lack of disclosures as well as simply testimonials or third party ratings that were either completely falsified or unintentionally so very old and had long since expired that they were no longer
Mm.
relevant and in many instances couldn't even be validated.
Yeah, no, that's what I've noticed, just some of the things that I've seen posted, some scaremongering, but then when you actually look at what they're dinging the firms for, I'm like, "Oh, this seems like it's pretty egregious," but, I think we've seen this a similar thing, like, on the IRS side where it's just they start with the most egregious violations, and then everybody else is wondering, like, "Okay, how much farther is this gonna go?" Like, do you anticipate them to become more aggressive, or are they just trying to set precedents at this point? And then what can firms expect to see in terms of actual, issues from them?
Sure. I think the fines were intended to really reflect an aggressive stance and put a little bit more of a bit of fear into the firms that are responsible for complying with the rule. And to the SEC's credit, I think they've been, very forward in advising firms what it is that they need to do. And this was, again, really that opportunity for the SEC to say, hey, we're serious about this. And I know it was a surprise, even with some of the securities attorneys that I work with and speak with on a regular basis, just how sizable some of those penalties were. Now, it may very well be that the firms that were flagged and admonished and received the sizable penalties, maybe there was a little bit more beneath the surface, but at least in terms of what they were flagged for, dinged for the lack of disclosures and a number of instances, I think was still pretty substantive. So the SEC made it clear in that most recent enforcement action that the sweep continues. So I do think they wanted that to be a bit of foreshadowing that they're not going away. And there's one area within the marketing rule that a lot of people still have questions and are interested in hearing from the SEC. So they've moved closer in this direction, specifically with third party ratings and then more recently testimonials. But they haven't specifically just yet commented on online reviews, which are a form of a way to collect and promote testimonials, with a number of firms curious to understand the SEC's stance on broader consumer facing platforms like Google
Mhm.
and Yelp, which weren't designed to accommodate the various disclosures that the SEC expects to see with promoted testimonials.
Yeah, and especially for those kinds of platforms where the advisors literally have no control over it, like, you can't I don't know that you have an option with Google to say, "Hey, we can't have reviews posted about us." So
Sure.
that'll
And you bring
be
up a,
yeah.
a, a good point there, where historically and today, unsolicited reviews on those types of platforms have never been at issue. Where I think we would like to see some additional clarification from the SEC is, now that advisors can proactively solicit reviews or solicit testimonials, can they choose to do so on platforms that are not designed to accommodate the disclosures that the SEC said should accompany each testimonial? And it really is a mixed stance, where some securities attorneys are now saying to their clients, yes, you can invite your clients to submit reviews on a platform like Google, but don't touch them, don't acknowledge them, so you don't adopt or entangle yourself from a regulatory perspective with that page. Others that are saying just the opposite and encouraging clients, if you do collect reviews there, to respond to each and every one and add a reply that includes various disclosures. So it's really one end of the spectrum at some firms, and another on at others. And then, of course, many firms that take the more conservative stance and really just looking to follow the rule by the book, which is to avoid platforms where there would be any risk by not utilizing a platform like Google that isn't designed to accompany the disclosures with each review. And so that's really where we designed Wealthtender to be the Boy Scout in the industry and ensure that if firms do utilize our platform, every time a review is published, it's going to incorporate all of those disclosures.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. So for advisors who are sufficiently scared listening to this conversation, what are some practical tips that you have or common things that you've been seeing firms miss in terms of, the new change that's been implemented, and then more specifically, like common, problems that maybe are not so obvious to advisors when it comes to staying in compliance, things that they might not be aware of that you've been encountering?
Yeah, so really getting back to the recent enforcement action, there were testimonials published on advisor websites that did not have any disclosures whatsoever to indicate if those testimonials came from current clients of the firm or not. In a number of
Mhm,
instances, these were essentially endorsements by unaffiliated, in some cases, micro celebrities, if you will, who had been paid to provide essentially testimonials about the firm, but in reality, they didn't have any working relationship or experience as a client of the firm. And
mhm.
without that being disclosed, nor the dollar arrangement for them to provide that endorsement, it really fell flat with the SEC in terms of their expectations. And so, again, those could have been more of the more flagrant violations. I think what most firms really need to be careful about and watch out for is on their website. Many firms, if they have an advisor that's been top rated by a particular publication, maybe they're an Investopedia top advisor, or their firm has been identified as a Barron's top 1200 advisory
Mhm,
firm. It's important that if you do have those types of accolades, that they're not too far in the distant past, so ideally within the last 5 years, if not more recent. And then B, ensuring that accompanying that little badge or logo that you might display on your website, or even if it's just text highlighting that accolade, it's important to include the disclosures that specifically indicate, when that ranking took place, if there was compensation involved for it, and what the criteria was in order for the firm or the advisor to earn that award. And so one thing I would really encourage advisors to do is, look at their websites, look at their bio pages for their advisors, where a lot of times it's just natural to include within the bio, and Jane or Jim is has received this particular award, and then you move on to the next sentence. That's something that's now going to need to be really fleshed out with all of those disclosures if it is mentioned. So an easy place to identify potential issues there. And what I would really recommend for firms is, provide that education to your advisors, bring them up to speed on what can and can't be displayed on a website, and if it
Mhm.
is displayed, whether it's on a website or LinkedIn, what disclosures need to come with it, and then really gamify it where you can have your staff then basically be rewarded for going out and taking a look to see if they can help identify areas where the website or social media platforms need to be cleaned up. So that's definitely the area that I would encourage firms, first and foremost, whether it's testimonials or third party ratings, to really ensure that you've got all of the appropriate disclosures that are out there.
Yeah, no, I like that suggestion of the gamifying it too, because I was just thinking through like, well, how would I go about doing that? I'm like, well, maybe if you did hey everybody, we're gonna get new headshots, and everywhere where your headshots posted, it's likely your bio and or other information about you is going to be on there. And if you have things like those, like awards that need to be removed or qualified, like what year it was, and just
Right.
any of the other disclosures, those things. Um, that's it. Might be a good way, good way to try to catch those. So other than those pieces, are there other areas where you've been seeing issues with the testimonials? Because I saw some of that SEC action with those specific scenarios you were talking about where there was no, people had been paid to give the testimonial or
Right.
whatever, and they'd never worked with the company, which is just like, okay, that's I'm not, I'm not a compliance consultant. I can see there's something sideways about that, but are there other areas that maybe are less obvious than that you've been seeing firms mess up, or just other areas within the marketing that have still been under question of what's the right call
Sure.
from some of the changes?
So
Just a slight interruption in this conversation. I wanted to bring to your attention two things that are important for you to know. So, we're always at the mercy of social media algorithms. So, if you can subscribe to the show, that would mean a lot to me. Even more to me if you can leave a rating and let me know what you think about it. But we have a new newsletter that's coming out. It's going to be very active in 2025. That is specifically around tax issues that I'm seeing advisors face in their own practices, changes in legislations, and the pieces that I think are critically important for you to stay ahead of as an advisor with the new administration. So, nearby, wherever you're interacting with this, will be the link of how to sign up for our newsletter. Also, nearby will be the link to my LinkedIn, which is the best way to get in touch with me, learn more about what we're doing for advisors in the tax strategy and compliance work that we do, and also to get access to the various tools and interviews and things that I do, specifically designed to help you improve your practice, improve your own tax situation, etc. So let's get back to the episode, and thanks for tuning in.
within the rule, it's also important to ensure any claims that are made by the firm can be substantiated. So another area that the SEC called out was firms indicating that they are conflict free. And of
Oh
course, if
yeah.
you are, collecting any form of revenue, you're not conflict free. And it's
Yeah.
such an easy layup for the SEC because every
Yeah.
single Form ADV has a section dedicated to conflicts. And then to publish on your website that you're conflict free, it's just a layup, like I said, for the
Yeah.
SEC to call advisors out there. With regard to testimonials that you asked about, a couple of things that are really important for advisors to understand. We talked a little bit about Google, but another area that it's really important for advisors to take in consideration is that the SEC only permits you to collect and promote testimonials if you take the appropriate steps to get started at the outset, which does include indicating in your Form ADV whether or not you do proactively utilize testimonials in your marketing activities. And then if you
Mhm.
do, it's important to have policies and procedures in place that articulate the methods under which you collect those reviews and the types of testimonials and where you're promoting them. And we provide a great template for that, kind of a Mad Lib style where firms can fill in the blanks. So really distilling the rule into something that again, really isn't all that complicated, but there's a lot to digest in the rule. And so with the right tools and resources, it's not that difficult. But those would be the things: check the box in the ADV, get the policies and procedures in place. And then the third thing I would say is very important is that the SEC doesn't want advisors and firms cherry picking and only inviting their friends and family or closest clients to write a review or provide a testimonial. So it's
Mhm.
really important at the outset that advisors or firms are reaching out to all of their current clients, giving them all the opportunity to invite or to write a review. And then once those reviews come in, to have a repository or at least a single place, whether through a platform like Wealthtender, or firms can certainly do this on their own, where every single one of those testimonials is going to be published, because that gives you the opportunity to then say, okay, here's our testimonial page, here's the repository of the invitations and every single response that we've received. Once you've done that, now the firm can point to particular reviews and, let's say, selectively just promote a handful of reviews on their homepage or on a social media post by providing additional disclosures to indicate that, hey, you're only reading a couple of reviews that we're including in this particular area, in order to better understand the more representative experience, which these views are not. So these views are not representative if we're only sharing a handful, but here's a link where you can now go and read all of the reviews that we've received. And that's really going to be something that will go a long way in terms of appeasing the SEC, to show that you didn't cherry pick. There's a place where somebody can read a representative list of reviews. And then if you are promoting just a handful of reviews on your homepage or in certain areas, including a link back to that where somebody, if they do want to read that more representative list, can do so.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. And I can just hear like some of some of what my clients probably would say to all this, which is just is it really worth it? Like, is it really worth it to go through all of the hoops, and potential issues of even sharing that? I don't know if you have thoughts on the relative difficult level of actually implementing a system to handle this in a way that's gonna be compliant, and then the is it worth it question of,
Yeah.
do the is it should we even be bothering with this?
Yeah, so on the first point, it's really not that hard to get started. Again, you check the box, you have your policies and procedures, you can use tools from Wealthcenter to put that up and get that taken care of very quickly. And then we also provide a template, whether a firm chooses to join Wealthcenter or not, that we're happy to make available to them, that has proven to work really well, that a firm can simply upload to their CRM, send that out to all current clients. So that way, if the SEC comes in, you can check the box and say, yep, here's the date when that email went out to all clients, inviting them to write a review. And from there, it's really just then a matter of thinking through, how do you want to promote those reviews. Now, one of the benefits, and getting back to is it worth it, of a platform like Wealthtender, is those reviews are not just going to appear on your website and you need to hope that somebody lands on your website. But with Wealthtender, we have about 500,000 consumers that visit the site each year. Many are looking for an advisor. So you're getting the reviews visible with that consumer audience. And perhaps
Mhm,
just, if not more important, those reviews also are seen by search engines like Google as a way to send positive trust signals to their algorithms. So we're seen as an official review platform. And ultimately, that can help advisors rank higher in search results. So it's not just the utility of those reviews with prospective clients, it's also from an SEO perspective. And what we've now seen, especially for a lot of independent advisors, is that within even a few weeks of collecting those reviews on Wealthtender, overcoming the imposter syndrome, do my clients like me? Am I going to get negative
mhm,
reviews? And we've seen
yeah,
thousands of 5-star reviews. Everybody loves their advisors. They just have to get over that hump of actually
yeah,
asking the question and putting the invitation out there. The reviews start coming in, and from there, what we're seeing are firms that are competing with a large wirehouse advisory firm, where that prospect says, well, I've narrowed down my search to you and this advisor with XYZ Wirehouse, and why should we hire you? You're independent. I get that, but they've got all these resources they're telling me about. And the firm responds saying, well, do they have reviews that look like this? And two things happen. One, those wirehouse firms, it's probably going to be years before their home office allows them to collect testimonials. And then more
mhm.
importantly, now that prospect is reading all these glowing reviews about the experience of their clients. And that's really, as consumers, whether we've hired a doctor, a lawyer, or even a plumber, we're not looking to see where they went to school. Again, it's great we've all got our education, but we're
Yeah.
looking to read those reviews. It's less about the
Yeah.
credentials and less about the experience. Now, obviously, that's important, as we're all aware in our profession and so many others. But what really gets consumers to pick up the phone or set up that introductory call is accelerating that trust building process and being able to see what
Yeah.
other people share about their experience.
Yeah, no, that's wonderful, and I think that that is a great counterpoint to the "Is it worth it?" Uh, so for advisors who are interested in getting access to some of those resources that you mentioned or learning more about what you're building with Wealthtender, what's the best place for them to get in touch and start, you know, getting serious about getting their review game in action?
Sure. So wealthtender.com/grow, GROW, is a great place to start. You'll find a lot of great resources there. I'm sure we'll have some in the show notes here as well. And I'm very easy to find on LinkedIn or elsewhere, and always happy to chat with advisors, jump on a call, whether they're interested in taking advantage of a platform like Wealthtender or not. Enjoy the conversation and happy to provide guidance for those firms that might be looking for tips or resources that we can share to help them get started.
Yeah, I love it. Any final thoughts before we wrap up? Anything you wanna share?
Well, since the day that we're recording this is fresh off a new election and administration, I do think that will be interesting as we think about the regulatory environment going into 2025. And, if anything, it probably should lend itself to a little bit more laid back. I think there's been a lot of frustration in the advisor and compliance community with just the degree of which and the frequency of new requirements and regulations that have been coming forth. So importantly, we're not going to see, the marketing rule go away. The enforcement actions and the sweeps are here to stay. But I do think that that's going to be something that firms will be able to hopefully take a bit of a sigh of relief that there might be a little bit less new regulation forthcoming and a chance to really digest everything that's come out here in the last number of years.
Yeah, that's wonderful. So for advisors who are listening to this, in the show notes, wherever you're encountering this, we'll have those links that Brian mentioned in his LinkedIn profile so you can go say hello. But I want to thank you again for coming on. This was a great conversation. And for the advisors listening to this, thanks for joining us. And always interested myself in getting feedback from you, what you took away, what you thought, and ideas for future episodes or things that you're concerned about that we can bring experts on like Brian to come and talk about, what they're seeing in the field for you guys. But I want to thank you again, Brian, for joining me. And this was another episode of the Financial Advisors Want to Know podcast.